What's up, everybody? I hope everybody's still doing well and staying safe and healthy out there. Today I want to work on, I got a response or actually a request from one of the patrons regarding memorizing chord inversions and ways or methods that I used to, or methods that may help in memorizing chord voicings and inversions. And just to briefly touch on it, I'll try to keep this video brief. The reason why this is important, and that's a great question, because the reason why this is important for us as guitarists is that the more voicings we have, and the more we're able to jump to these various inversions to create, more harmonic interest in our accompaniment, is we want to basically provide a beautiful canvas for the soloist or the vocalist to be able to paint on. We're providing that background pad or foundation, and typically guitarists, by default get overlooked for piano players because they are able to provide this huge lush canvas, because they have 10 fingers to do it with, whereas us as guitarists, we typically only have, the most we have is 5. Unless on a standard 6-string instrument. So with that said, it's our responsibility to try to find the most intricate or most interesting parts of the harmony and really key in on those to give the soloist and the listener some harmonic interest, and like to grab their attention, like, oh wow, that was cool. Dissonance versus consonance, tension versus release. So the best way I started learning my inversions was to break it down to the lowest common denominator, which in my case at the time was triads. It should have been dyads, I guess. Dyads are great, but with the dyads, you have to really know your harmony even more in depth, I would say, because you have 2 notes, and you want to, with those 2 notes, you can get into counterpoint, you can get into a lot of interesting things that are, to me, much more complex than dealing with just triads. For instance, with dyads, you could take the scale, and dyads are actually a great way to learn the scale. You can learn the scale in dyads. Very, interesting. And George Benson, like as I study and transcribe Benson, he was able to take these dyads and play off of the notes in between and give that real soulful and bluesy sound. But you can also use those as, accompaniment tools as well. But like I said, for me, I started with the triads, and basically, the triads, you're only going to have 3 different inversions. So to me, it's great to start there because, you're limiting yourself, but you're trying to figure out, okay, I have 3 different inversions that I can use. How can I get the most miles out of these 3 chords? So for instance, we'll start in C, and we'll use this inversion. You got G, C, and E. C, E, G, then you have E, G, C. Then you're back to that, which is the same as this one. Do same thing for the minor. Same concept, same principle, and all you do is go to the next note in that particular group of 3 notes. So in this case, we have G, C, and E flat. The next note in those the group of 3 notes is gonna be G. So you slide up to the G. C is gonna be E flat, and then G is gonna be C, and so on and so forth. So start there. memorize all your triads. You know, this is easy, and all the of course all the string groups. So you got this string group, which is back to back to the major. Then you have this, and I'm sorry, I'm trying to, because I don't want the video to be super duper long, so I'm trying to rush through this and get to the meat of your the answer to the meat of your question. Major, major, major. And that's just these sets of strings right here. And you can also do it for the low strings too. G, C, E. And this is kind of hip. You know, rarely do you hear guitarists, well, most of the time it's in the middle of the guitar, but in this case we're dealing with the bass, and actually you would hear a bass player might play this. So you're gonna go from here to E. And then the same, of course, concept for the minor. That's kind of hip. E flat, C, you know. So start there. The other thing that I guess probably around my second year in undergrad when I was studying, I really started to transcribe Wes and really understand how he was able to take these block chords and basically use them like with this infinite possibilities of chord solos. Like Wes, in my opinion, was a pioneer of chord soloing using block chords as a piano player would. Probably because his brother Buddy was a vibraphonist and a pianist also. So I'm sure that had an influence on how he was able to take what he heard Buddy playing or whatever on the piano and relate that to guitar. And you know, that's just my theory. But regardless of that, basically when we start dealing with four note chords, the concept is the same, where you take the 4 notes and move up to the next note in that 4 note grouping. So in this case, we have this chord, and then you have this chord. And these chords are really pretty. And this is very common, of course, because that's one that a lot of people play. These people don't play as much, maybe in a chord melody or something like that. But you know, make sure you practice them with a metronome so that you can get to them when you want them, or you know, when you want to. And the thing about the 4 note voicings that are the great block chord voicings is that you could use them like this. Can also be used as an A minor 7 chord. You see what I'm saying? So now we start getting into the extensions of the harmony versus just the regular triads. Of course, now you got other colors that are in the chord. And getting back to how Wes was able to manipulate that, on a previous video, I always reference the quote unquote Wes Montgomery chord scale, where he's taking these 4 note chords, or these block chords, and putting diminished chords in between, which is really just emulating the 5-to-1 movement. And when I say 5-to-1, if you're in A minor, the 5 would be the you're resolving from 5 to 1. So here, 5, 5. So I would encourage you to learn. So we're dealing with this 4 note or this string grouping right here. And it works same concept just as before with the triads. You're gonna take it and you know this. You're gonna take it and move up to the next the next note in that four note grouping of four note grouping, you're going to move to the next note. So in this case, G goes to A. The C will go to the E. The E is going to go to the G. The A is going to go to the C, and so on and so forth. If you need to write these out just so that that'll, you know, kind of expedite your learning process, I actually did write them out, and I'm, as you can see, I've listed just this particular exercise, or these this particular in the key of A. You can see it listed here, so that should help you as you go through all 12 keys. And you know, it's like I said before, once you know them on the string group, because they're movable, that also helps, you know, as far as getting you to the finish line in that regard. And then of course you could do it on the other string sets as well. But I guess to answer your immediate question, the way I started to learn or memorize more voicings was to take the things that I just showed you and use you know, use a metronome and just try to play it in time, get it under my fingers, and then try to play it in a progression or a playing situation. So where you have a minor 2/5 in B flat, now one other quick thing I want to tell you that you may not know is that, of course, now when you're dealing with dominant chords, the same as I said before, like the same chord can function in various ways. So we'll just deal with this dominant chord right here. This is inversion of a 13 chord. But this is also an inversion of a C minor 7 or C minor 11 chord. And now we're getting into more like chordal harmony, which becomes very modern sounding. So when you're comping a blues, you can actually, I've heard George actually use this inversion of a dominant chord and then go down here to the C minor 11, because it still functions as F7. So this, I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves, but once you get comfortable with this chord scale, then you start to get into more of the chordal harmony, where now you're getting a more modern sound. And I'll go ahead and give you, for now, I'll give you the inversions of that. It's pretty much harmonizing a Dorian scale. So we got D, E, and these are 11s. This is really hip, particularly when you're playing modal tunes and you want to play different, you know, voicings other than just comping on D minor. Because you can still use that chord, that West Montgomery scale. Which is hip. And you can use, you can even use some of those other chords once you do the 4-note chord inversions. You can use those in there as well. Also, bouncing off of the chord provides a little bit more harmonic interest in comping, and you know, when you're accompanying a soloist, as I said in a previous video. But definitely focus on that kind of sound, particularly for modal songs, and for blues as well. But once the idea is to memorize these inversions so that you can use them for voice leading and start to think of them almost as single notes, if that makes any sense. Because that's how Wes, when he was doing his chord solos, he would focus on the top note, the melody note. And, you know, even though he would be playing the harmony underneath, the melody is always king. So you want to make sure that you know, don't ignore the melody when you're, you know, playing behind a vocalist or a soloist. Like if you hear them playing a line, you might want to, you know, you might want to follow them. And that, not only does that give you points as an accompanist with the soloist or the vocalist, it just makes the audience say, oh, that guy's great. He knows exactly what's going on all the time throughout this entire performance. And that is so critical, and it makes the soloist, you know, feel good, because it's like, okay, he's actually really listening. Then even with a melody so simple, you can start making the harmony more complex. But don't, I always tell other students, don't go overboard. Like, you still want to play within the context of what's going on. You don't want to be a obnoxious player where you're playing, you know, unless that's what the situation calls for. And I just did all. If the situation calls for something like that and you can get to that, you know, it just try to use your best judgment. And you won't always be right. Sometimes you might be wrong, but that's the beauty in learning this, because you've learned from your mistake, and now you know, okay, that wasn't really hip. I probably won't play that again. But getting back to the answer to your question, start with the triads, go into the 4-note voicings, major and minor and dominant, and just use that method of taking whatever 4-note grouping that you have of notes, and provided that hopefully they're, you know, they're not too close together diatonically where it's going to be difficult for you to voice it. But if it is, then you just you know, move on to the next possible voicing. Sometimes, you know, 2 notes together, it may not always work voicing wise, but sometimes it does, you know. So hopefully that answers your question. Also go and really dig into that Wes Montgomery chord scale. And all it is 5-to-1, you know, just adding a diminished chord in between the inversion of the previous, you know, the previous chord. And that'll really open your mind up to more possibilities. And then you'll start to understand, like for instance, Wes would use this chord as this is an A minor chord, but this is also a D sus chord. You know, so he would use chords like that, just like you would use this as an F9 chord, but it's also an A minor 7 chord. So then you start to develop an idea of the multiple uses of the same chord. That way you don't have to necessarily get off of the chord, or you may resolve to that chord, you know. You know what I'm saying? It just opens your ear up. So hopefully that helps. If it doesn't, or if you need more detail, then you can hit me up or email me. And it's okay sometimes if it's hard for you all to articulate your question, shoot me a video text, or you could post a video message, a short video message of what you're asking for. If it's hard to you know, verbally articulate, just play it for me, or show me what you're having issues with, and then I'll, you know, send another video message back explaining. So